The velvet box felt heavy against my thigh, a solid reminder of 3 years of shared memories and late-night promises. I smoothed the lapels of my suit jacket and glanced at the reservation clock above the host's stand. 8:15. Clara was 45 minutes late, but I forced myself to stay patient. She was trying to secure that senior partner promotion, and I knew how much stress she carried lately. "Ethan Vance?" the host asked, stepping toward me with a polite smile. "Your table is ready, sir?" "Thank you." "I'm still waiting on one more person," I said, shifting my weight. "She should be here any minute." The heavy glass doors of the restaurant swung open, bringing a draft of cold autumn air. I turned, expecting to see Clara hurrying in with her usual apologetic look. Instead, my heart dropped into my stomach. Clara walked into the dimly lit foyer, her silk dress rustling with every step. Her hand was wrapped tightly around the arm of Julian Thorne, the senior director of global expansion at our firm. Julian wore a tailored navy tuxedo, his manicured hands resting over hers. They were laughing together, oblivious to the crowd, until Clara's eyes locked onto mine. She didn't flinch. She didn't drop his arm. She just stopped walking and looked at me with a cool, detached gaze. "Ethan," Clara said softly, stepping forward as Julian released her arm. "You shouldn't have waited." "What is this, Clara?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I looked between them. "We had dinner plans. It's our anniversary." Julian stepped up beside her, placing a heavy, possessive hand on her shoulder. He smiled down at me like an executive reviewing a bad report. "Let me handle this, Clara. Ethan, you're a good technician, but you lack vision. You're out of your depth here tonight." "I wasn't speaking to you, Julian," I said, my knuckles turning white in my pockets. "Clara, please tell me what's going on. Why are you with him?" Clara sighed, adjusting the silver diamond bracelet on her wrist, a gift I had never seen before. "Ethan, don't make a scene in public. We need to talk, but not like this." "Make a scene?" My voice cracked slightly, though I tried to hold back the sudden wave of humiliation washing over me. "I've been sitting here for an hour holding a ring in my pocket. You walked in holding another man's hand. Then pull it out or put it away, Ethan, because it doesn't matter anymore," Clara said, her tone hardening. "Our engagement is over." The words hit me like a physical blow. The chatter of the restaurant faded into a dull hum, and my chest felt impossibly tight. "Over? Just like that? After 3 years?" "Look at yourself, Ethan," she spat, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You're 32 years old, grinding 80 hours a week as a government-cleared architect, living in a modest apartment, trapped by non-disclosure agreements and rigid bureaucracy. You don't have ambition. You don't have wealth. I built the entire security infrastructure for the firm." I pleaded, stepping closer, desperate to reach the woman I thought I knew. "I gave up private sector contracts so I could build a stable life for us." "Stable isn't enough," Clara hissed, stepping back into Julian's side. "Julian offers me high society. He offers me global contracts, access to the board, and a life where I don't have to wait for government approvals just to buy a house. You can't give me what I want." Julian chuckled, pulling a gold money clip from his pocket and laying a pair of $100 bills onto the maitre d's desk. "Here's for his trouble. Ethan, go home. Take a vacation. Leave the real business to people who actually know how to lead." Several junior associates from our firm, sitting at a nearby booth, turned to watch the exchange. Whispers rippled through the dining room. I stood alone in the center of the foyer, frozen as the woman I loved turned her back on me to walk toward the executive dining room with Julian. "Clara," I called out one last time, my voice trembling with raw pain. "Is this really what you want? You're throwing everything away for a title and his money?" She stopped for a brief moment, looking back over her shoulder. There was no warmth left in her eyes, only cold calculation. "You were a stepping stone, Ethan. I've outgrown you." She walked away without looking back. Julian cast a triumphant smirk over his shoulder before leading her through the archway into the private VIP lounge. The host looked at me with pity, holding out the money Julian had left on the counter. "Sir, do you want this?" "No," I said quietly, turning toward the door. "Keep it." I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped outside into the pouring rain. Cold water drenched my suit, but I barely felt it. The shock had burned away, leaving a hollow, freezing emptiness inside my chest. I reached into my coat, pulled out the velvet box, and stared at the sparkling diamond inside. For 3 years, I had poured my intellect, my time, and my security clearances into protecting that firm and protecting Clara. I was the silent foundation keeping their entire digital empire safe from collapse. They thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. They thought my restraint was powerlessness. I closed the box with a sharp snap and shoved it into the nearest trash receptacle on the curb. You think I'm just a technician? I whispered into the rain, wiping the water from my face. You think you can take my work and destroy my life without consequences? I pulled out my phone and looked at the glowing screen. A notification displayed my active Level 4 Department of Defense clearance token, the single security key that held the firm's entire central server array together. No more, I said aloud to the empty street. I am done protecting you. The glass doors of the glass skyscraper unlocked with a soft chime as I swiped my keycard at 11 p.m. Rain dripped from my coat onto the polished marble floor, but I barely noticed. I rode the elevator to the 45th floor, the silence pressing against my ears. When the doors opened, the glow of monitors illuminated the open-plan office. Sam Reed looked up from her workstation, her eyes widening as she noticed my soaked suit. Ethan? Sam stood up, setting her headphones down. What are you doing here this late? I thought you were at dinner with Clara. It's over, Sam, I said, stepping toward my desk and turning on my workstation monitor. Clara and I are done. Sam gasped, taking a quick step closer. What happened? You've been planning that proposal for 6 months. She walked in with Julian Thorne, I said, my voice steady despite the tightness in my throat. Hand in hand. She made it clear that a government-cleared architect isn't enough for her ambition anymore. Sam shook her head in disbelief. I knew Julian was hovering around her department, but I didn't think. Ethan, I'm so sorry. But you need to know something. Julian has been quietly lobbying the board for 3 weeks. I paused, looking over at her. Lobbying them for what? Your project, Sam whispered, coming closer and lowering her voice. The flagship defense threat mitigation architecture. He's telling executive partner David Miller that you're moving too slowly due to clearance roadblocks, and that his team can deploy it globally across private enterprise clients. That architecture is locked specifically to my security clearance protocols, I replied sharply. He can't deploy a line of that code without my explicit authorization. He doesn't care, Sam warned. There's an emergency board meeting scheduled for 9 tomorrow morning. Julian requested it. Clara is listed as his co-presenter. I looked at the glowing terminal in front of me, watching the system logs flicker. Let them present it. Ethan, you have to stop them, Sam urged, placing a hand on my desk. If Miller hands the contract lead to Julian, Julian takes credit for your entire career's work. He can take the credit, I said quietly, a cold calm settling over my mind. Let's see if he can handle the weight that comes with it. The next morning, the grand conference room was packed with senior partners and board members. David Miller sat at the head of the long mahogany table, nursing a coffee. Clara sat 2 seats down, dressed in an expensive white blazer, looking radiant and utterly unfazed by my presence as I sat quietly near the back wall. Julian stood at the front of the room, clicking to his first presentation slide. The title read, Global Cyber Architecture, Modern Security Frameworks by Julian Thorne. Good morning, everyone, Julian began, his voice booming with smooth confidence. For years, our firm has relied on outdated, rigid security models that hold back our corporate expansion. Today, alongside Clara Hayes, I am introducing a revolutionized platform that will secure our international banking and defense clients simultaneously. Sam, sitting next to me, leaned over. He literally stole your white paper word for word, she whispered, her voice trembling with indignation. Watch, I whispered back. This new system, Julian continued, gesturing dramatically to the screen displaying my intricate encryption algorithms, eliminates operational friction. With Clara managing client relations and myself leading global deployment, we project an immediate 30% increase in annual retainers. David Miller leaned forward, looking intrigued. Julian, this architecture looks remarkable. But isn't this tied into Ethan Vance's defense clearance structure? Julian laughed dismissively, glancing back at me with contempt. Ethan laid a decent foundation, David, but his clearance-bound approach creates needless bottlenecks. I have streamlined his framework. We no longer need to wait on individual clearance authorizations to scale this company forward. Clara smiled up at Julian, nodding in agreement. We need modern leadership, David. Ethan's methods belong to the past. Miller nodded slowly. Very well. Julian, I am granting your team full management over the framework starting today. Ethan, you will assist Julian in transitioning the root assets. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply looked Miller in the eye and said, Understood, Mr. Miller. As the board members filtered out, talking excitedly about the new expansion plans, Julian and Clara walked toward the exit together. I stepped into the hallway, cutting off their path. Satisfied, Julian? I asked, keeping my hands in my pockets. Julian smirked, adjusting his silk tie. It's just business, Ethan. Survival of the fittest. You had the tech, but I have the influence. You took credit for 6 years of my life, I said, turning my eyes to Clara. And you helped him do it. Clara folded her arms, looking down at me with cold indifference. Stop holding on to the past, Ethan. The world moves on, and so do I. You need to accept reality and stop acting like a victim. Julian can take this firm places you never could. You don't understand what you've just taken on, I said softly. We took the future, Julian snapped, stepping past me. Now get back to your cubicle and prepare the handoff files. I watched them walk down the glass corridor together, laughing quietly. Behind me, Sam stepped out of the conference room, her face pale. What are you going to do now, Ethan? Sam asked quietly. I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked the encrypted administrator portal. I'm going to let them realize that without the foundation, the entire tower falls. I sat at my terminal, watching the real-time data streams flicker across the screen. My hands hovered over the keyboard as Julian Thorne strode into my glass office, flanked by 2 armed corporate security guards. He slammed a thick leather-bound binder onto my desk, his face flushed with arrogance. Sign it, Ethan, Julian demanded, leaning over my monitor. This is the full administrative transfer for the defense contract servers. We closed the deal with the Department of Defense in 2 hours. I looked down at the documents, then back up at Julian. You don't understand how these protocols work, Julian. You can't just transfer root access with a signed piece of paper. Don't give me your technical garbage, Julian snapped, tapping his finger against the desk. David Miller gave me full authority over this department. Your personal encryption key is holding up a $50 million deal. Relinquish administrator control now. Clara stepped into the doorway, crossing her arms as she looked at me with disappointment. Just sign the transfer, Ethan. Stop trying to sabotage Julian's project out of spite. Spite? I asked, looking directly into Clara's eyes. I spent 4 years setting up this infrastructure under my personal level 4 security clearance. If I transfer root access without federal approval, it violates federal compliance laws. I have contacts at the Capitol, Ethan, Julian scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. The board doesn't care about your bureaucratic technicalities. Hand over the security keys, or I'll have David fire you for gross insubordination right here. If I leave, the keys leave with me, I said softly. You're bluffed out, Ethan, Julian spat, pointing a finger at my face. You're too weak to burn your own career down. You care too much about this firm. Give me the access codes or security escorting you out in handcuffs. I stared at him in complete silence. A strange, serene calm washed over the anger that had been burning inside my chest since last night. Julian was right about one thing, I had sacrificed everything for this firm. But he was dead wrong about my weakness. Give me 5 minutes, I said, my voice entirely flat. I need to initialize the key detachment sequence from my terminal. Finally, Clara muttered, shaking her head. I told you he'd fold, Julian. He always falls in line. Julian smirked, stepping back toward the glass door. 5 minutes, Ethan. Don't make me come back in here. They walked out into the main corridor, leaving the guards stationed at my door. I picked up my encrypted satellite desk phone, dialed a secure 10-digit extension and placed it to my ear. The line clicked open after 2 rings. Dr. Marcus Vance, Defense Cyber Compliance, a deep, authoritative voice answered. Go ahead, Ethan. Dr. Vance, I said, keeping my tone steady. I am calling to initiate an immediate voluntary revocation of my Level 4 security clearance and my proprietary security tokens, effective instantly. There was a sudden pause on the line. I heard the rustle of papers before Dr. Vance spoke again, his voice sharp with concern. Ethan, do you realize what you're asking? Your clearance is the single active security anchor for your firm's entire defense network. If you revoke your authorization right now, every system tied to your key locks down instantly. I am fully aware of the consequences, Dr. Vance, I replied, staring through the glass wall at Julian and Clara laughing near the executive elevator. The firm is attempting to transfer root access to unvetted corporate executives without federal clearance. That is a severe breach of protocol, Dr. Vance said, his tone turning cold and serious. If they operate without your active clearance token, their access becomes illegal under federal defense guidelines. I can process your revocation immediately, but there is no undoing this, Ethan. You will paralyze their entire server architecture within seconds. Process the revocation, Dr. Vance, I said without hesitation. Cancel my personal encryption protocols and lock the keys. Understood, Architect Vance, Dr. Vance said solemnly. Initiating detachment protocol. Token authorization revoked. Security clearance cancelled as of right now. Good luck, Ethan. Thank you, sir, I said, hanging up the phone. I stood up from my chair and picked up my coat. Instantly, a deep red emergency banner flashed across my primary monitor screen. System critical. Security token revoked. All encrypted channels terminated. Suddenly, a loud, piercing alarm echoed through the hallways. The bright LED ceiling panels sputtered and dimmed into emergency red lighting. Down the corridor, frantic shouts broke out as hundreds of monitors instantly turned pitch black across the open floor plan. Julian burst through my office door, his face pale and his phone buzzing wildly in his hand. Ethan, what did you just do? The entire server room just locked us out. My presentation screen went blank. Clara rushed in right behind him, horror written across her face. Ethan, the international investors are on line 1. They're saying their secure portals just collapsed. I calmly slipped my arms into my coat sleeves and picked up my briefcase. I told you, Julian. The system was anchored to my clearance. Then fix it. Julian yelled, grabbing my arm in a panic. Unlock the servers. Use your password. I brushed his hand off my sleeve and looked him dead in the eye. I don't have clearance anymore, Julian. I just officially revoked it with the Department of Defense. Technical support can't save you now. Clara gasped, stepping back as she stared at me as if looking at a stranger. Ethan, you destroyed everything. You ruined the entire firm. No, Clara, I said, stepping past them both into the chaotic hall where panic-stricken employees ran between desks. You wanted Julian's vision. Now you can enjoy it. Red alert banners flashed on every monitor down the 30-story glass tower. Screams and frantic yelling echoed through the hallways as trading desks, client portals and secure communication channels simultaneously dropped dead. I walked toward the elevators, keeping my briefcase held firmly in my hand. Sam Reed caught up with me in the lobby, her eyes wide with shock as she clutched a glowing tablet. Ethan. Sam gasped, keeping pace with my long strides. The board presentation room is in complete chaos. Julian's pitch to the European defense delegation failed mid-slide. The entire network flagged his terminal for an unauthorized breach attempt. That's standard protocol when a level 4 token vanishes without a handoff, I replied, pressing the elevator call button. The server team is panicking, Sam whispered, looking over her shoulder. They tried to force a route bypass, but the DoD firewall triggered an automated total lockdown. Every file in the corporate vault is frozen. Before I could reply, the speakers in the hallway crackled to life. Ethan Vance, report to Executive Suite A immediately. Ethan Vance to Executive Suite A. You don't have to go up there, Sam said, her voice filled with sudden concern. They're going to put everything on you. I have to hand in my physical building pass anyway, I said with a calm smile. Watch the desk for me, Sam. I rode the elevator straight to the top floor. When the doors opened, David Miller was pacing back and forth across his mahogany-paneled corner office, dripping sweat into his collar. Julian stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, frantically screaming into his cell phone. I don't care what the technical team says. Julian yelled into the phone, slamming his fist against the glass. Get those investor slides back online now. We are losing $30 million every 15 minutes. Ethan. David shouted the moment he saw me walk into the office. He practically sprinted across the room, grabbing me by my shoulders. Thank God you're still in the building. The entire global network just shut down. What is happening with the root security key? I revoked my clearance, David, I said, looking him dead in the eye and gently removing his hands from my coat. I told Julian this would happen. Revoked it? David roared, his face turning bright red. Are you insane? You can't just revoke federal clearance in the middle of a multi-million-dollar international deal. Override it immediately. Use your master bypass code. There is no master bypass code, David, I said clearly. The encryption framework was built under my personal level 4 security token. By law, without my active clearance on file with the Department of Defense, accessing those servers is a federal offense. Julian threw his phone onto the couch and marched over, his face twisted in rage. You did this on purpose. You sabotaged us because Clara dumped you. I followed federal protocol, Julian, I replied, stepping toward him without flinching. You told the board this morning that my clearance was an unnecessary bottleneck. You claimed you could lead this system without me. so lead it. I can't lead a frozen server array. Julian screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. Fix it right now, Ethan. I'll double your salary. I'll give you a vice president title. Just put the encryption tokens back. Even if I wanted to, I can't, I said coldly. The revocation is absolute. The Department of Defense has taken direct administrative control over the firm's data infrastructure until a full federal audit is completed. David gasped, sinking heavily into his leather armchair, looking 10 years older. A federal audit? If they audit our server transfer records. You're ruined, I finished his sentence for him. I turned around and walked out of the executive suite. As I entered the private hallway near the emergency stairwell, a hand reached out and grabbed my wrist. I turned to find Clara standing against the wall, her cheeks streaked with mascara and her hands trembling uncontrollably. Ethan, please, Clara sobbed, her voice trembling as she clutched my sleeve. You have to stop this. You're destroying my career. David just told me that if the defense contract cancels, my senior partnership is revoked. You made your choice, Clara, I said, staring at her weeping face without feeling a single shred of pity. You told me last night that I was just a stepping stone. You said I lacked ambition. I was wrong, she cried, grabbing both of my hands in desperation. I didn't mean any of it. Julian convinced me that you were holding me back. He told me he'd make me a global director. Please, Ethan, for the sake of the 3 years we spent together, save us. I protected you for 3 years, Clara, I said softly, pulling my hands out of her grasp. I protected your reputation, your career, and your future. But you threw all of that away the moment you thought someone richer came along. Ethan, please don't leave me like this, she begged, collapsing against the doorframe as tears streamed down her cheeks. I have nowhere else to go. My entire career is tied to this firm. Then you better start updating your resume, I said, turning my back on her tears. This was the path you chose. Live with it. I pushed open the heavy glass doors, leaving Clara sobbing alone in the dimly lit corridor as the alarm sirens continued to wail through the collapsing building. A week had passed since I walked out of the building. Sitting in a quiet coffee shop across from the city financial center, I watched the news ticker scroll across my laptop screen. Vance Global Security Compliance Audit collapses corporate firm market cap by 40%. Sam Reed slid into the chair opposite me, holding 2 hot coffees. It's a total bloodbath, Ethan. Client retainers are dropping like flies. How bad is it inside? I asked, taking a sip. The board opened a formal forensic investigation yesterday, Sam replied, leaning in closer. They pulled the logs from the night before the lockdown. Julian was caught red-handed trying to use stolen admin credentials to bypass the Department of Defense firewalls. That's a direct federal violation, I said softly. It gets worse for him, Sam said with a small smile. David Miller confronted Julian in front of the entire executive committee. Julian panicked and threw Clara completely under the bus. What did he say? He claimed Clara misled him, Sam explained. He told the board that Clara guaranteed him your security keys could be transferred without federal clearance. He literally shouted at her in the middle of the hallway, calling her an incompetent associate who ruined his career. I shook my head, feeling neither joy nor surprise. Julian only cared about his ego. The moment things went wrong, he was always going to protect himself. Clara tried to defend herself, Sam continued. She reminded him that he was the one who demanded full administrative access. But Julian walked out and left her standing there in front of the board. She was stripped of her clients on the spot. My phone buzzed on the wooden table. I flipped it over to see 3 missed calls and 5 unread text messages, all from Clara. I didn't open them. Are you going to talk to her? Sam asked gently. There's nothing left to say, Sam, I said, locking the screen. She traded trust for ambition, and now she's facing the price. Late that evening, a heavy rain began to fall against the glass windows of my apartment. I was packing my personal documents into a leather folder when a soft, desperate knock sounded at my front door. I opened the door to find Clara standing in the dimly lit hallway. Her hair was damp, her mascara smudged, and her high-end designer blazer was soaked through. She looked fragile, stripped of all the polished arrogance she had worn at the restaurant a week ago. Ethan, she whispered, her voice cracking as tears filled her swollen eyes. Please, don't close the door. You shouldn't be here, Clara, I said, keeping my hand firm on the doorframe. I had nowhere else to go, she sobbed, taking a hesitant step forward. Julian locked me out of the international project. The firm suspended my license pending the federal audit. They're blaming me for everything. Julian blamed you because you let him, I replied coldly. You chose to stand beside him when he took my work. I was stupid, Ethan. Clara cried out, clutching her wet coat against her chest. He tricked me. He promised me a partnership, he promised me global access. But he was just using me to get to your security clearance. He never cared about me. I know, I said quietly. I tried to tell you that in the restaurant. I made a terrible mistake, she begged, dropping to her knees right in front of my doorway, reaching out to grasp the edge of my jeans. Please, Ethan, look at me. Look at what we had for 3 years. I know you still care about me. You can fix this. Tell the compliance board that it was all an administrative error. Save my career. Save us. I looked down at her as she wept on the cold floor, her hands trembling against my shoes. A week ago, seeing her like this would have broken my heart. But now, looking into her frantic eyes, I felt nothing but a profound, empty stillness. You didn't care about our 3 years when you walked into that restaurant holding Julian's hand, I said, my voice steady and quiet. You didn't care when you stood by his side while he tried to take my life's work. Ethan, please, she wailed, clutching my leg tighter. I love you. I've always loved you. I just lost my way. No, Clara, I said softly, reaching down to gently remove her hands from my ankle. You didn't lose your way. You just showed me who you really were when you thought you didn't need me anymore. Ethan, don't do this, she sobbed, looking up at me with sheer terror as she realized I wasn't yielding. If you turn your back on me, I have nothing left. You had everything, Clara, I said, stepping back inside the threshold. You traded it for empty promises. Ethan, she screamed as I slowly pulled the door shut between us. Goodbye, Clara, I whispered. The latch clicked firmly into place, cutting off her desperate cries. I turned off the entryway light and walked toward my desk in the quiet dark, leaving the past behind me for good. 3 months after the full server lockdown, the morning sun broke over the city skyline. I stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new corner suite, holding a steaming mug of coffee. The gold lettering on the glass door behind me read, Vance Independent Cyber Consultancies. A soft knock sounded at the open frame, and Sam Reed walked in carrying a stack of fresh folder briefs. She looked energized, wearing a sharp gray suit with a confident smile. Good morning, Ethan, Sam said, setting the client files down on my desk. The official regulatory filings came through this morning. The old firm is filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And David Miller? I asked, turning to face her. Resigned in disgrace late last night, Sam replied, shaking her head. The board replaced him after the Department of Defense terminated all government contracts. The legal penalties alone wiped out their quarterly reserves. What about Julian Thorne? Blacklisted, Sam said firmly. The Cybersecurity Alliance revoked his credentials after the fraud investigation concluded. No major firm in the country will hire him to manage a network, let alone lead a team. He's completely out of the industry. And Clara? I asked quietly, looking out over the city. Sam hesitated for a brief moment before answering. She resigned from the firm right before the collapse. I heard from a mutual colleague that she moved back to her hometown to take an entry-level compliance job at a small regional bank. She's starting over from scratch. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling a quiet sense of closure wash over me. It's tragic, but she chose her path. You built all of this from the ground up, Ethan, Sam said softly, gesturing toward the bustling floor of analysts outside my office. When you invited me to join your new firm, I knew we'd succeed, but I never expected government backing this quickly. Speaking of which, a booming voice called out from the entryway. Dr. Marcus Vance stepped into my office, wearing a sharp navy suit and holding a leather briefcase. Sam nodded respectfully and stepped back toward her desk. Dr. Vance, I said, walking over to shake his hand firmly. Thank you for coming by. I wouldn't miss the opening of our primary contractor's new headquarters, Architect Vance, Dr. Vance said with a rare, approving smile. The Department of Defense officially ratified your security consultancy contract 20 minutes ago. Your Level 4 clearance is fully restored, alongside your new proprietary defense framework. Thank you for placing your trust in me, Dr. Vance, I replied. I promised you an architecture that could never be compromised from within. You proved that 3 months ago, Ethan, Dr. Vance said, setting a pen down on the signing desk. You proved that real security isn't about titles or corporate greed, it's about integrity. That's why the Pentagon insisted on bringing your team on as our chief external advisors. We won't let you down, sir, I said, signing my name across the final page of the federal agreement. I know you won't, Dr. Vance said, taking the signed document and tucking it into his briefcase. "Welcome back to the front lines, Ethan. I'll see you at the Defense Summit next week." After Dr. Vance departed, Sam looked at me with a proud expression. "We did it, Ethan. We really did it." "We did," I agreed, walking back toward the floor-to-ceiling glass panel overlooking the metropolis below. "Get the team ready, Sam. We have a lot of work to do." "Right away, boss," Sam said with a smile before turning to head out onto the main floor to brief our analyst team. I stood alone in the quiet warmth of the morning sun, watching the city wake up beneath me. Just a few short months ago, I was sitting in a high-end restaurant with a ring box in my pocket, humiliated, discarded, and broken by the people I trusted most. I had believed that losing Clara and my position at the firm was the end of my life. I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out my clean, newly issued Level 4 access token, and clipped it to my collar. I never needed revenge. I didn't need to destroy Julian or Clara with anger or malicious schemes. All I had to do was step back, revoke my support, and let the natural consequences of their own greed and dishonesty tear down their fragile empire. They thought I was weak because I chose loyalty and quiet dedication over flashy promises. They forgot that I was the foundation holding up the entire structure. When you betray the foundation, the entire tower collapses on its own. I took a deep breath of clean air, feeling lighter and stronger than I ever had before. My past was gone, burnt away by the truth, leaving behind a clear path forward. I had finally taken back complete ownership of my career, my dignity, and my future.